So these examples are a little bit more tricky and the kind of examples that you'll get tested on when you do the National 5 exam. So again, we're trying to make the subject x in each case. So on this first one here, as you can see, x is on this side, so we need to get rid of the d and the y, so the x is by itself, so it's the subject. So the first thing we do in an example like this is we remember that any number or letter, any term that's not a fraction can be made into a fraction by putting a 1 on the bottom of it. Then what we can do is we can cross multiply. So the y gets multiplied up onto this side by the f, and the 1 can get multiplied up here, but as you know, when you multiply something by 1, it just stays the same. So I'm just going to leave it the same. X minus d equals fy. The other way of thinking about that is because y is dividing on this side, when it moves to this side it has to multiply. Change side, change sign. And then lastly I need to get rid of this minus d, so it needs to move over to the other side, and again changing sign will mean it changes to a plus. So the final answer would be x equals fy plus d. Next one, this time the x is on the other side, and we'll need to get rid of the 2 and of the 7. So kind of the same idea. Remember the p actually has a 1 underneath it, so if we cross multiply here, 7 will go on to this side and multiply, and 1 would go up to this side and times by 1. So we get 7p equals 2x, because 2x times 1 is just still 2x. And then finally we need to get rid of the 2 beside the x, so because it's being multiplied by x, when 2 moves to the other side it has to become a divide. So 7p divided by 2 equals x. And again, to get your subject on the better side, you can just swap them both. So the answer would be x equals 7p over 2. On this first example on this page, the x is inside the bracket. Now if we come across an example like this, we have to get rid of the brackets first before we can start moving things about. So what I'm going to do first is multiply out the bracket, in other words multiply s times x and then s times minus 5. So I'll get g equals sx minus 5s. So I want x by itself, so first of all move this bit over to the other side and it'll change to a plus. So g plus 5s equals sx. And then finally get rid of the s, so when this s moves over it'll have to go on the bottom and become a divide, because on this side it's multiplying. So to do the opposite, so g plus 5s all divided by s equals x. And again you can swap sides. You might be tempted here to think, oh well that s on the bottom might cancel with the s beside the 5 on the top. Remember, you're not allowed to cancel a term on the bottom with just one thing on the top. It has to cancel with both or nothing. And the other way of thinking about that is this has to be factorised on top before it could cancel with the s. So those s's can't cancel. Next one on this page then, we're trying to get x by itself. This looks complicated, but it's not as difficult as it looks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the third. The other way of thinking about this problem is that it's written t equals x squared y divided by 3. That's the exact same question there, nothing's changed apart from instead of writing a third in front of a number, you can put it underneath, and that's because finding a third of anything is the same as dividing it by 3. So then what I'm going to do is, like in the other ones, I'm going to put a 1 on the bottom of that and cross multiply. So 3 will multiply on that side and 1 will multiply on that side, and we'll be left with 3t equals x squared y. Okay, so looking better. Next, get rid of the y. So 3t divided by y equals x squared. And now finally, we want it to be x equals, and at the minute it's x squared equals. So to get rid of the squared on the x, what we need to do is square root both sides. So if I do the square root of x squared, I'll just get x on this side. But when I do the square root of the other side, well, I can't really do it. I'm just going to write 3t over y all square rooted. So that's going to be my final answer. X equals 3t over y square root. Last one then. So in this first example, I'm going to again put the 1 on the bottom and say 5 is going to get timesed on that side and 1 on this side. So 5p equals 2 square root of x. Let's fix that equals because it looks a bit weird. Now next I need to get rid of the 2. So 2 is being multiplied by square root of x, so it needs to divide on the other side. So we'll get 5p divided by 2 equals the square root of x. And then this is the reverse of the question before, because I want to get rid of a square root. So the opposite of square rooting is to square something. So when the square root moves over, it has to square this whole thing. And how you can write that is 5p over 2 all squared equals x. If you wanted to expand that out a little bit more, make it a bit nicer from your indices work, squaring something that's a fraction is the same as squaring the top. So the top squared is 25p squared, and squaring the bottom, so that would be 4. So you could write it like that as well. And then this last one, again we want x to be the subject. Now the difference between this and all the ones we've tried before is that this problem has 2 x's, and that is a problem. What we need to do is get the 2 x's together so we can factorise and then rearrange, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So start with the same way. That would be a 1 on the bottom there, so times that up onto that side and times that up onto that side. So we'll get x, y on this side equals x plus 3. Now remember, I want all the x's to be by themselves, so I'm going to leave the 3 on this side and move the x over here so that both the x's are on the right side. So I'll get x, y minus x equals 3. Now the little trick that we do is we factorise, because that means that we can just write 1x instead of writing 2. So as you can see, x is a common factor on this side of the equation. Both of these things can be divided by x. So if I factorise that by taking out a common factor, I can write x bracket y minus 1 equals 3. And when we've factorised, what with the factorised side really means is x multiplied by both these things. So if x is getting multiplied by this bracket, if I want to move that bracket away, it can go over to the other side, but it would have to divide. So the final answer is going to be x is left on that side, 3 is left there on top, but it's now getting divided by y minus 1. And that would be your final answer.